All right. The following information relates to company X. We have the output, the total costs, versus to calculate the total cost that company X will incur if it produces 100,000 units. So here we're going to be using the high-low method to get our variable costs and our fixed cost so that we can form a cost function that can enable us to determine the cost that we're going to incur if we produce a certain number of units. So using the high-low method, the first thing that you want to do is you want to determine the highest output and the highest cost, the lowest output and the lowest cost. So usually in questions they won't just give you a few information like this. There'll be a lot of information. It will be you who has to choose the highest output and the highest cost, the lowest output and the lowest cost. So in this case, the lowest output is 60,000, the lowest cost 140,000. Then the highest output 90,000, the highest cost 170,000. That's the first thing you need to do. Determine the highest cost and output, lowest cost and lowest output. After you've done that, the first thing you need to do is you need to determine your variable cost. So in order to get our variable cost, we say variable cost equals highest cost minus the lowest cost Mhm. Then for the highest cost minus lowest cost divided by the highest output minus the lowest output. So from our information, we do this. So the highest cost is 170,000 minus the lowest cost 140,000 divided by the highest output 90,000 minus the lowest output 60,000. So if we get our calculators, 170,000 minus 140,000, we get 30,000. Again, 90,000 minus 60,000, we get also 30,000. 30,000 divided by 30,000, we get 1. All right. So our variable cost is 1x. X is going to represent the number of units. All right. So this is our variable cost. Any questions before we go to the next part? We'll have to determine now the fixed cost. Okay, next we need to determine now the fixed cost. So remember, total cost equals variable cost plus fixed cost. So remember, so to get our fixed cost equals total cost minus variable cost. All right. This is the equation that we're going to use to get the fixed cost. Now, this is where you have to determine if you want to use the high, meaning the high output and the highest cost, or if we want to use the lower output and the lowest cost. It is up to you to choose whichever you want. Not all the time will they give you the same answer if you use the high or the low. Sometimes they'll give you the same answer. Other times they won't give you the same answer. So in this example, we are going to use the high, meaning we're going to use the highest cost and the highest output. So we say using the high, so using the high, our total cost was 170,000. And our output was 90,000. All right, so get our variable cost. Remember, our variable cost is 1x. So since we're using the high, so we're using 90,000 units. So we're going to replace x with 90,000. So we say 1 times 90,000. Because remember, this is our variable cost, 1x. So for 90,000 units, you just replace x with 90,000. So 1 times 90,000, that gives you 90,000. Then you're going to say 170,000 minus 90,000. That's going to give us 80,000. So this is our fixed cost, 80,000 kwacha. So we can now form our cost function, which uses the equation of the line y equals mx plus b. So if you remember earlier on, as I said here, m represents the variable cost, x represents number of units, b represents the fixed cost. So our cost function is going to be 1x plus 80,000. So this is the cost function for this company. And with this cost function, they're now able to predict what costs they will incur whenever they make a certain number of units. So before we go any further, any questions? Maybe let me also illustrate using the law. Okay. Here we used the high. So if we say, okay, using the law, and so under the law, the total cost, the lowest total cost incurred by this company is 140,000, and the number of units produced is 60,000 units. So using the law, total cost 140,000. Then we have our variable cost, which is 1x. So if we substitute 60,000 for x, it's going to be 1 times 60,000. So our variable cost is 60,000. So to get our fixed cost, we're going to say 140,000 minus 60,000, that will give us 80,000. So that is our fixed cost. And again, as you can see, it is the same. We put it in this format since using the high and the low are the same, so our cost function will be this one. But take note, not always when you use the high and the low, you get the same answers. Other times you might get different answers. All right. So we've now got our cost function. So now the question asks us, calculate the total cost that the company will incur if it produces 100,000 units. So we use our cost function to determine what our total cost will be. So we say our variable cost is 1 with 100,000 units. So we replace x with 100,000 plus 80,000. So 1 times 100,000, that's 100,000. 100,000 plus 80,000, 180,000. So this is the total cost we incur if we produce 100 units. So that's that with the Hydro method. First thing, determine your high cost and your high output, then your low cost, then your low output. Get your variable cost using this formula. Variable cost equals highest cost minus lowest cost divided by highest output minus lowest output. Sometimes it's not, output won't be the activity. Sometimes it might be hours. So that doesn't matter. Once you get your variable cost, then you can either use the high or the low to obtain your fixed cost. If you use the high, use the highest total cost and the highest output. If you use the low, use the lowest total cost and the lowest output. And then you'll be able to get your cost function, which will enable you to determine what cost you incur whenever I make a certain number of units.